I know what you're going to say.
You haven't been right once.
You have voices. I have other things.
Because I believe we are alike.
But this is a very fresh approach.
And I'm not here to tell you about Jesus. You already know about Jesus. Either he lives in your heart or he doesn't.
It is a masterpiece of some kind.
We all wish we were from someplace else, believe me.
You make the lie.
I hate to break it to you, but there is no big lie. The universe is indifferent.
Welcome to Mad Men, the weekly show where we discuss a show that used to come out weekly. Each week, we take a close look at an episode of the AMC series Mad Men, which ran from 2007 to 2015. We gear our conversations about the show around the conversation the show is having about gender, the patriarchy, and, maybe having a drink or two with a buddy. Maybe it turns into something else. Let me introduce our crew here. First of all, I'm Jon Negroni. You know me. But over here, well, Will Ashton, stop digging holes. It's time to podcast.
Hey, what's up?
And of course, we're going to get high and listen to Mike Overholes. Hey, Mike.
Hey, John. I take a clip to the jaw like everybody else.
I'm so excited to talk to you guys about the Hobo Code. This is episode 8 of season 1 of Mad Men. And we've been doing this a while. We're 8 episodes in. How are you guys feeling about the first season so far? Can we do a little bit of a check-in? Will Ashton, you're fresher to the show than we are, but you have seen this episode once before, many years ago. What's going on in your head right now?
I think it's a good season. I mean, I don't know if I have anything extra to say at the moment before we get into the episode, but I'm digging it, and I'm excited for what's in store.
I was wondering if we should do like power rankings or something, like every episode we do, just keep I think somebody might have even suggested this at one point, and I'm failing to credit them, but we could just, be like, all right, where does this land on the first season? And then end the first season being like, here's everything. And then as we go through the whole show, we can keep track of our favorites.
I mean, I think it would be just better to do a ranking of each episode at the end of a season as opposed to doing a power ranking.
I agree with what I said earlier. We'll do it as we go. So,
okay.
I'm just kidding. And by the way, this episode came out September 6, 2007. Mike, how are you feeling?
I think I pumped it a lot in the last episode, but Hobo Code is literally I think the episode of Mad Men that made me really love Mad Men. You mentioned that
earlier in our podcasting. Yeah, I think you mentioned in the second episode. This was one of your faves.
I think this is one of the first episodes where you start really getting what I would refer to as payoffs of the first couple episodes they're building a show, building a culture, and then they're building characters, and getting the firsthand look at Dick Whitman, bringing Midge back and starting to see Dawn's relationship with her, getting to see everything that's happening with Peggy. I think this is when the show really found its footing, and you're like, okay, this is what it is, and it's going to be fucking sick.
I think it's when Matthew Weiner and the crew, in this case, Chris Provenzano writes the script and Phil Abraham directs, and it's they have these characters that they've been sketching out, that they've been putting and setting up and showing us some slices of their lives. This is where the deconstruction begins. It's where their character change begins. It's almost like, this is 1960. We're setting up the decade. Now we're sort of seeing okay, this is 1960. This is where all the dominoes are going to fall over the course of the entire show. I think this is a good episode to mark in that sense. This is where we start to break from the status quo in a meaningful way. But what do you think? I mean, Will, from your perspective, because again, you're not as fresh on this, so you probably don't have that big picture view of it.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like this is kind of where. I mean, I think the show has been smart about kind of balancing the wish fulfillment with the themes and how it kind of balances the 50s aren't, or in this case, I guess the early 60s aren't quite what people idealize them to be. And there's obviously a lot of prejudice, a lot of animosity, just a lot of just bad stuff happening. But there is a class, there's a way about it that can be a little bit nostalgic and romanticized. And this episode, I feel, breaks down that a bit more by focusing more on the characters who are on the outside, whether it be because of race or gender, or in the case of Dawn/Dick, because of social class and their upbringing and how they have a kind of chip on their shoulder about, how they were never quite in the social class that they would like to be it's and it's just I feel like this is where we really kind of get the fully rounded show coming even more into fruition than we have already.
I do like what you said, John, about how it's setting up the decade. Especially as we keep going, like I think they do, especially with all the Nixon JFK things, especially a couple episodes down the line. But it's absolutely true that they're really hitting on the themes in this episode of where it's going to go for the characters in the unraveling, and not to steal your lead in, but the opening of the episode I think is the best first 10 minutes of Mad Men so far, like thus far.
Really?
Yes.
That I don't agree with that. But before we talk about the opening, a quick reminder to people listening and being like, you guys, you sound smart, against all odds and what I know about you previously. If you want to get a head up on what we're going to talk about, we do recommend that you pick up a copy of Mad Men Carousel, the complete critical companion to the show. It's by Matt Zoller Seitz. It is something that we've been referencing together. We'll just flash his copy from the library. Definitely worth a check out. If you want to watch the show along with us or continue to do so, that's a fun resource as well because it has even more insight than even that we're getting into. So,
and for
quick nod to that.
And for all you groupies out there, if you just at Jon Negroni and ask him, he'll just buy it for you. Just mention him on Twitter. He'll do it for sure.
We got to do. Well, we have a giveaway we're going to do because we have extra copies.
Only for Negroupies. I'm really just trying to coin the term Negroupies.
You just have to keep saying it.
Negroupies.
You have to mark your nickname.
TM.
I don't think Mike was here when we announced that we had extra copies to give away.
I definitely was not. I was actually caught a little off guard last week when I came back and you guys started referencing this book I've never fucking heard of. But I just pretended to. I literally Googled it while on mute while you guys were talking about it.
Yeah, Mike, what's your favorite part of the book?
It's like a book club that he just didn't know he was assigned.
It literally was like hearing about friends who were hanging out together and you weren't invited.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You have to
almost like it's almost like you are in the office with Bert Cooper and you haven't read Atlas Shrugged.
That's right. Out of your own rational self-interest, no less.
Mm.
So the Hobo Code. I can't talk. The Hobo Code. It's like I wanted to say the Home Club.
No, you almost. Let's be honest. You literally almost just said the Hobo Cock.
No, that'd be funny. Oh man.
But speaking of, we get to Peg. Never mind.
Yeah. So the episode opens with Pete and Peggy, the double P's. They're at Sterling Cooper a lot earlier than you would expect. It's like 7 a.m. And Pete Campbell is there, it's implied, because he's unhappy at home and he just wants to be at work. He just doesn't want to be around his wife. He's a newlywed, but he is clearly having a lot of issues, which I think we're going to get into. And I want to probe you two about what do you think is going on with Pete? And what do you think is the root of his dissatisfaction with his marriage with Trudy? Because we've seen Trudy a bit at this point over the course of the season, and she seems great. So it's just one of those things where we'll have to dig a little bit deeper to see what the showrunners are after when it comes to him. But Peggy's in the elevator with him with Hollis. The doors are about to close, and the service elevator is out. So Hollis asks him if it's all right if a black janitor can ride with them. Pete looks a little annoyed about it, but Peggy's like, yeah, sure. They don't even say anything. They're just sort of like, it barely registers, right?
And it should be noted that this time it seems to be actually broken down. Like last time it was because Don told him he paid him off, but this time it does seem to be actually broken down, which is a little funny, kind of play on last week's episode.
Especially, since those two things follow each other right after when you're watching the show chronologically. So this is kind of a setup for something that's about to happen. Basically, they're both in the office. Peggy, I forget why she's supposed to be there. A little bit earlier, why she's there, maybe because she's not working on copy anymore for Belle Jolie. So maybe.
I mean, if she is a secretary, does she have to be there earlier?
No, because the other secretaries aren't there.
That's a good point. Yeah, I don't know.
Is she stalking Pete Campbell?
I don't know. Maybe I just believe too much in Peggy. I just took it as a character development of her just really liking her job or wanting to climb the ladder at her job, and so she's willing to put in the extra effort and be there early.
That's the only thing that makes sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
She's a little eager,
Eager beaver,
and it's good because she gets off work at 3, so that works.
But she got off early.
That was a joke I was gonna make, and you beat me to it, Mike.
Oh boy. Oh, so yeah, that's what happens. Basically, she goes to Pete's office, is like, "Hey, you want a coffee?" And he's like, "No, but you want something, don't you?" Tells her to shut the door. She says, "Oh, no one's here." And it's interesting, Will, because Matt Zeller cites his in Mad Men Carousel kind of says is like, oh, because she doesn't think the janitor is anybody. But my thinking was that the janitor wasn't there yet.
Sure.
And I don't know if I was reading it because the janitor was like a floor below.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't get that from Peggy, that she was kind of just being like, oh, no one's here. Like the janitor didn't mean anything. I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of wondering that too, though I was also going to bring up something that I didn't realize until I read Matt's book, which is that the first line that Peggy has in this episode is "hold the door," when, as far as like the elevator is concerned.
Hodor,
kind of,
you mean? Yeah,
sure, whatever. I don't watch Game of Thrones.
But you knew what that meant.
Wow, I really thought you were setting up a Game of Thrones joke. You weren't? Are you serious? You just said "hold the door" without any implications of Game of Thrones?
No, I mean that's her first line is like, "Hold the door, please." Like, it's
Will's he's taking this seriously, basically.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, I'll double check to make sure that's the line, but I don't.
No, it's the line.
That's the line. I'm more surprised that is a coincidence to Game of Thrones. I'm baffled.
Sure. Yeah, I didn't watch the episode of Game of Thrones, and I will never do so.
You watched the first season. I
did, and that was a bit of a waste of time, I think. But it's
a dishonest man podcast here.
But yeah, I mean, she holds the door, and then, like you said, later on, Pete tells her to close the door, and then there's a lot of stuff with doors here. I mean, later on, like she gets like invited into the door. I just like, I just think that's an interesting thing with all the doors.
Yeah, what is this, Monsters Inc?
Sure.
But yeah, so Pete puts the moves on Peggy, and they have sex. It's kind of like rough at first. He rips her blouse. Kind of like almost like he's marking her, and that is something like we see that pitch later. And I just want to introduce the idea of marking your man and what that means, or how that connects to total ownership. And I think it's clear to see Pete's arc in this episode is that he wants that. He wants total ownership of Peggy. He wants to mark her. And what's brilliant about Peggy's pitch, and why it sort of like rankles the executive's feathers, the older stodgy guy, is because she's talking about like a woman can do that. A woman can, make a claim like that. And that can kind of come off as like in the 1960s as like, what? Like women just, they want to be one of 100 colors in a box, don't they? That's what people say. So yeah, sex scene. The silhouette over the window is quite suggestive. And then the janitor walks by and kind of just like looks, and no real expression. What do we make of that?
I don't know. I kind of push back bits. I know that's something Matt Zollersai said as well. I feel like the expression is kind of quizzical, like kind of like, like he's not really going to say anything about it, but he is kind of just like, well, you don't see that every day. Like, I mean, I think it's a little bit. I don't think it's
kind of it's kind of indifferent, isn't it? I think that's
a little bit. Yeah, I mean, it's more just kind of like same shit, different day. Kind of feel like like, well, something I got to deal with while I clean up the floors. It's just kind of. Yeah, I guess indifferent works, but I don't know. I feel it's not like completely blank.
I do think it's a confirmation, though, of the comment of "no one's here," because it's "no one's here," and then it's a blank face of indifference and uncaring, because it doesn't even matter for him to then have an opinion or say anything about it, because what's it going to do? It's just going to get him into trouble. A bunch of white people in their office fucking, like, whatever. I got other shit to worry about right now.
They don't even expect him to say anything, I guess. That kind of adds to the idea too.
But I know you push back, John. Here's why I love this start to the episode, because touching on what I was saying earlier about like this is where you start getting like character development. Yeah, Peggy and Pete, they fucked once, but that was, ending an episode. It was early, but it's just like it just starts the episode of like, boom, here we are. And it's not just that it's a sex scene. It says so much, especially about Pete. I know you're asking what we think about Pete, but with everything that's been happening to him and everything that's been set up for his character, for then this to be the start of the episode, again, it's just now the show takes off running. And we can really start to develop and have these opinions and see clearly where I think Pete is headed.
Yeah, we have that moment, too, where Pete is sort of like, oh, by the way, like right after they have intercourse, he's like, oh, yeah, and I never read your Belle Jolie thing. clearly didn't seem to care. Like in the elevator, it gets brought up too, where he's just sort of like, a thing like that. That's kind of his go-to catchphrase for when he's jealous, I guess, because he wants to be a writer and he doesn't, he's just not a very honest person. And so it's like one of those things where he sees that like Peggy has talent, and it kind of like, it makes sense why he would try to dominate her and try to have sex with her in that moment. I think like people misread it as like he's horny. There's a way deeper psychological thing going on there. I want to get back to that once we revisit more of their arc. We'll move on quick here to the next thing. We're in the switchboard. You thought the show forgot about the switchboard. It is kind of amazing how like they did seem to be like a bigger deal at the beginning of the show. Barely ever referenced again. This is only, I think, the third time we've seen either of those characters. One of them played by Flo. But we have the newest new girl, Sterling Cooper, Lois Sadler, which I know for you, Will, was great. You were very happy to see this guest star come on to the show, Krista Flanagan.
Yeah, Krista Flanagan. I don't know. I mean, did you guys not watch Mad TV growing up?
No. So I was boring.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's not that surprising, I guess. I mean, it was, not like an incredibly popular show, but it was popular. It gave us Keegan-Michael Key and Jordan Peele, Ike Barinholtz, Michael McDonald, some people of some fame nowadays.
When I think of Matt TV, I literally only think of the mom from Family Guy.
Oh, yeah, Alexis Blundell, too.
Yeah.
Also from Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Also,
Alexis Blundell is Gilmore Girls. Are you talking about Alex Borstein?
Oh,
it
sorry,
is Alex Borstein.
Yeah. No, my bad.
And then isn't there the guy that does all Frank Caliendo? Okay, I digress. We don't need to talk about Matt TV.
Yeah, who could forget Frank Caliendo of Frank TV, a show. I mean, I could. How much you guys want to talk about Frank TV?
Talk about a madman.
Sure.
I think like the whole Mad TV connection and everything. Lois is a great character, because I think the comedy of her is really great. She's hilarious, and I think that like she has like it's not just this episode too, but like it's very cringy. But like, there's this moment in this episode where somebody's just like, "You can't just put your name on things." Like, haven't you heard of Joseph McCarthy? She's like, "It's the bowling team." And it cracks me up.
Great line. Time. Yeah, that's a great line. Yeah.
The delivery is like 90% of the line.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But Lois is infatuated with Salvatore Romano, the art director, the closeted homosexual. This is the episode where it becomes more explicit that he is gay, even though the point of his character is that we are supposed to know or understand that he's gay, even though the world around him doesn't. She overhears a conversation with his mom, and she's like, well, I got a hit on him. So when Joan comes by, she gets more information about Sal, and then kind of wants to maybe set up a rendezvous with Sal later. There's also this quick moment where Joan asks that something to do with Mona puts a call straight to her, which I read that Roger Sterling, John Slattery, was supposed to be in this episode, but they had to cut him out because he was on Desperate Housewives and there was something going on, like a conflict. And so this made me wonder if there was another subplot here involving Joan and Mona and Roger that they cut out because it felt kind of random, I thought.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I read that too. He was doing a stint on Desperate Housewives, which why would you, it makes sense. Why would you be worried about the show that you're on when you could be on the hottest television show of 2007?
It was a very popular show. I don't know if you're being sarcastic, but it was very popular.
I know. I mean, I think maybe I was being sarcastic in my voice, but I am being 100% serious. Like, my mom loved the shit out of that show, and if my mom loves a show, it's popular.
Yeah, my mom, she loved that show, and then she moved on to This Is Us, and now I don't know what she's going to watch. What TV shows does your mom watch,
Just
Sean?
Get your mom to watch Mad Men, so then she can listen to a podcast right after every episode.
I'm not going to let my mom listen to this if I can help it. But you didn't answer my question. You dodged my question here.
What is my mom watching right now?
No, I was asking John what does his mom watch. I didn't get to ask her.
She likes all kinds of things. We talked about, I think one of the things we watched most recently was Mayor of Easttown. She loved.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
I forgot about that.
My mom is the one who introduced me to like movies and TV shows, so she has pretty good taste.
Nice.
So anyway, we finally have a scene with Don. Don comes in, and this is our first scene with him. This is a shot that echoes or it mirrors the ending of the episode. He goes over to his office. The shot starts with a shot of his back, which is important for later. And he goes to Peggy, finds out that Cooper is waiting for him in his office, and Roger is not there. So this is just a meeting between him and Cooper, which raises some alarm bells. You have to wonder, like, what's going through Don's head. He's like, am I about to like get Pete Campbell right now? Because that is very unusual. He usually his buddy Roger, they're Batman and Robin. He's got a, it's like if Robin was like summoned by the commissioner. It's like, what's about to happen to me? But yeah, he goes to Cooper's office and everything's great. Robert Morse comes in, gives an amazing line, rest in peace. But basically, he gives Don a check for $2,500. Basically, there seem to be two dual motivations here. One of them is to make Don happy because, he certainly is appreciative of a lot of the stuff that Don has been doing this season, from Bethlehem Steel to the Lucky Strike pitch. This is a bonus. $2,500 back then must have been like $20,000, $25,000, however
22.
much. $22,000 in 1960. So it's a lot of money. It's a very big bonus. And there's a moment where Cooper looks at Don and is basically like, I believe we are alike. You are a productive and reasonable man, and in the end, completely self-interested. And there's a moment that I've kind of struggled with this scene because Don looks visibly uncomfortable about this. Immediately, Bert is like, have you read her? He's talking about Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged, which is the objectivist philosophy, this idea that, people need to like be exceptional and nobody should limit them. And, basically being disaffected is the right way to be. And Bert kind of looks at Don like that, as somebody who's ultimately very selfish, but that's a good thing. And that's what's going to make him be successful in life. I have a theory about this, but I got to wonder. What was your takeaway from this scene? It's very cryptic.
I was disappointed that Bert was a Rand stan. I have to admit,
it's not too surprising, right?
I'm not saying it's unsurprising. I'm just disappointed.
Sure,
I've actually never read Atlas Shrugged, but I've just, like you said, from
Fountainhead is better,
Okay.
but it's also still gross and icky. But it certainly is a good work, and it's objectively
sure.
Bad philosophy, good writing.
Yeah, Mike, I guess, is also not a fan. So 3 thumbs down for Ayn
My
Rand.
thing for Atlas Shrugged is people shouldn't read the book. They should play BioShock. They'll get the gist.
I saw the movie, or 2 of the movies for Atlas Shrugged, and both of them were not good. Yeah, they're both very boring films. But Teller was in one of them, which is bizarre. Anyway, no, I think it does sum up Bert's character well, where he does have a very objectivist point of view when it comes to people. Even like when he has a little, what do you call it? Little like fern hedge. That
bonsai trees.
Yeah, palms. Yeah, that exactly. He's like, he's kind of like, I think he just doesn't really have a clear perspective on people. Being an advertisement as long as he has, it just seems like he's, like he says, he thinks that he's basically figured out humanity by age 40. Yeah, and that he's kind of like pegged people to different archetypes and different ways of life. He doesn't really account for like differences and complexities. He's kind of puts people in boxes, and he's putting Don in a box, which he doesn't feel very comfortable with. Exactly, because that's Don's personality, right? He doesn't want to be one of 100 colors in a box. Sorry, I had to.
I took it as I thought Don was uncomfortable because wow, I have a completely opposite opinion. I thought maybe you guys got this from your super smart book club book that tells you what to think about the show, but
no, I did not. I don't think the book really gets into detail on that part.
It doesn't really talk about this. Yeah,
I took Don's uncomfortableness literally as the fact like he was pegged, that he is a self-interested man. But Don doesn't want people to know he is self-interested.
No, that's what we're saying.
No, you're saying that wait. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, no. So okay, let me restate.
We got too caught up with that.
What I'm saying. Yeah. I don't want to speak for Will, but what I'm saying is that Don puts on a mask. He puts on like a shell to pretend to be somebody, and the fact that Bert sees through that and is able to see who he is, like who he actually is, and to see that indifference freaks him out because he actually doesn't want anybody to see that. Like that's the whole point to his character. So we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, I heard Will say something different. Okay, maybe I don't know.
Well, I mean, I would.
Did I misunderstand what you said, bro?
I don't think so. I mean, maybe we're just kind of speaking around it a bit, but like I think Don, not only does he have a fear of being caught, I guess, but I think he also has a fear of being kind of assumed one position or another. Maybe that's where Mike is disagreeing. Is that like we said, like he doesn't want to be like 100, like one of 100 different lipsticks in a box. Like I think he kind of wants to be on the outside, you know, like when he goes later in the episode and kind of hangs out with the hippie hipster crowd. Like I think he kind of likes to be one of two things or one of many things. Like he has that kind of like, you know, straight laced persona, but he also likes to fit in with people on the outside. And I think he doesn't like to assume one identity or another. And I think that kind of comes into his fear of the suburban life. He doesn't really like to assume that he fits into there, but he also doesn't really like spending time at work all that much outside of, you know, like he doesn't really feel comfortable in any one particular place. And I think that's something that Bert also recognizes.
Yeah, turns out, completely agree with you. I don't know if I just was still thinking about Peg and Pete, but I heard you say something different.
Yeah, men only think of one thing: Peggy and Pete's sex life. Gross. So then we cut to Lois. She's heading over to the art department, clearly trying to flirt with Sal. She kind of makes this remark where she's just like, I work out of a closet all day. And, you can almost see Sal just be like, I know something about closets.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's just sort of like, I need directions, trying to sort of like start something. She does the thing where she's like, ciao, ciao.
Was that a saying even back in the day, back then, like being in the closet? When did that become predominant? Is that a joke just for us?
It could be a purposeful like anachronism, like because it is kind of subtle. It's not like she's saying like I'm stuck in the closet. Like I think if it had gone that far, it would have been a little bit like, all right, Provenzano, calm down. I think Will's looking it up. We'll let him do his routine fact check. But in the meantime, we next go over. Oh, and I do have to mention like Sal's brilliant moment. She was like, you don't need money to dress better than you do, Dwayne. It's like, okay. I'm sorry. I think that's just the perfect amount of Sal sass that I like.
According to something called the Journal of Ethics, this idea of privacy led to the sense of hiding a fact or keeping something a secret, which goes right back to the beginning of the 17th century. Okay,
so we're hundreds of years ahead of schedule there. So next we go to Pete, who's drinking in his office because he's miserable as always. And Trudy kind of like barges into his office and he's just like, what are you doing? This is my office. Like, has a bit of a temper tantrum. And she's just like, I just wanted to celebrate. Like, we just bought a house. Like, what the heck? Like, she's just like, what are you doing? Like, we're married and we're hot. Like, you can just see like Trudy's just like, what's the problem? Like, I get this sense where she's just like, what is wrong with this guy? But she's trying so hard to just sort of like bury it so that things can be happy on the surface.
I mean, I think it is kind of interesting to see the flip where like Peggy gets invited into the room even though she doesn't feel welcomed, whereas Trudy feels like she is entitled to come into the room when she isn't welcome. Yeah.
Well, that's the root of what attracts Pete to Peggy. He wants to dominate her. He can't dominate Trudy because Trudy is his equal. Like that's the whole idea behind, I think like what makes this a good episode, I think, is how we constantly see the underclass in this episode. The hobo, the black janitor. We have like women are seen as an underclass as secretaries, and there is like a spectrum of power dynamic. And then in this case, we see that the root of Pete's misery is that he's married to this person. He calls her a stranger because to him, he always believed that he would have power. He would have dominance over women. It's what's setting up the decade shift in sexism and gender politics and how that slowly kind of gradually changes. And he sees Peggy as that person. Hence, he tries to mark her. Whereas with Trudy, he can't control her. Like we saw in the last episode, he got chipped and dipped.
Yeah.
Does he?
No, I mean, I think that's... Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, Will, all you, buddy.
No, I was just gonna say. I mean, like that's kind of gets to like the thrust of the episode, which is outsiders looking in and sure, yeah, there you go. Outsiders looking in and marking people, like with the Hobo Code. Like they kind of mark people as they see them in their way, kind of presuming or knowing what people are like from an objective perspective. It kind of is at the root of this whole dang episode.
So, and Mike, you were going to say something probably very profound, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we need to go there. I was going to say, you're talking about how Pete wants to control women. I'm not convinced that Pete wants to control women. I think as of right now, I am of the stance, especially as the show is portraying him, that Pete is a little bit but ahead of his time. He would be okay not controlling women, but his whole life, his whole upbringing, and everything in society is telling that he has to. And so it's this.
Well, it's the hunter's fantasy, right?
Exactly. And, I think, if Pete was a modern man, he'd be totally okay. He might even stay home, let Trudy do whatever Trudy wants to do. But I think that's what makes Pete such an interesting character.
Yeah, we're all Pete Campbell. But okay. So there's that whole scene happens, and he's clearly just sort of like trying to be like, I'm sorry, and just try to like bury it. We next go to the Belle Jolie Mark Your Man pitch, and I'm trying to remember when was the last time we had like a big pitch in the show. I don't think we had one in Babylon. I don't remember.
Was it
5G.
Bethlehem Steel? Was it the
Bethlehem Steel was the first one I thought of. I don't know if there's been one since then, because Red in the Face, we didn't have a pitch. They just met with the Nixon guys.
Did we talk about how Bethlehem, they had the Steel meeting, and then there was a whole Bethlehem thing in the episode 2 after that?
Yeah, the Babylon. We didn't make the connection.
Sorry,
but then from Babylon, then we went to, of course, the this episode, which has a lot of religious undertones. So as I was actually going to mention too, at first, they do this whole thing where it's just like Belle Jolie lipsticks, Mark Your Man. They quote like things that Peggy has said earlier in the show, and like her copy clearly is working on the younger executive, the more progressive executive, but the older one is just sort of like, this isn't how we do things. See, like he's very, like we have all these shades of lipstick. Women want this, women want that, and so Don kind of like does this. He does something that kind of gets remembered a lot as a classic Don pitch, where he tries to be like, all right, well, then the meeting's over. And so he kind of like strong arms the executive into being like, wait, what? You're not going to try? And he's just like, why would I? You don't believe in Jesus, essentially, is what he's saying. But okay, what is he actually saying with the whole Jesus stuff? Who has a theory about this? Anybody? Which of you has Jesus in their heart? Neither? Okay.
What do you mean by a theory?
I don't.
In this case.
A read on like, what do you think why do you think Don is invoking Jesus in this scene?
I don't know exactly, but I just feel like he's kind of just like attacking their kind of prejudice view on women. And I feel like that might be at the root of their prejudice views, but I don't exactly know for sure that if that's the case.
Yeah, because we would connect that to like his quote essentially is like, I'm not going to get you to believe in Jesus. He either lives in your heart or he doesn't. My thing with this is
cool
that
line.
Well, I think it's savviness on Don's part, because he can read this guy. He reads the mask that this guy puts up to kind of bring it back to one of the central themes. And he sees that like chances are extremely high that he's a religious person because he's a very conservative person. He's very like stubborn and like closed-minded to change. And that's just sort of the stereotype of like the WASPs of this time, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. That's what it is. Yeah. And I think it essentially is Don trying to capitalize on what this guy believes in order to seduce him, because he even compares it to seduction later. And he's basically just saying that, like, I can't get you to believe in something because you already believe in like a higher power. You are a believer or you're not. And I think it's the culmination of one of Don's arcs in this season. We're starting to see him apply all of this work and effort he's put into understanding, Jewish people, the Babylon stuff, the things that he's been getting from like picking up on from Rachel and all of that. And it's one of the, I think, beauties of the show is that it can have threads like that might not be immediately obvious at first, but are such an underpinning of his character that he feels like he's growing and sort of declining at the same time. Does that make any sense, or do I sound hysterical?
No, I think that gets to what I wanted to say, and I think you said it much better than I would have.
I think Mike disagrees.
No, I definitely agree with what you're saying. I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. I don't think I picked up on that right in the scene. I just took it as maybe an expression. Also, like, I work in sales, and walkaway deals are very, very powerful. I've done it myself, where you have this power dynamic where the buyer thinks like they have all the power and, you know, you want them so much. So then you being saying it's not worth it, I'll walk away.
They have to sell to you.
Exactly.
As The Office taught us.
Exactly. And, but that makes me think of what we're going to get later. Just like a play on it with what we're going to see later with Don and Midge. But I digress. I think your read is also pretty good. And what I heard you say is that religious people are closed-minded. So you can have...
That's all you heard. You were just like, well, John, you did it again.
The new Pixar theory.
Yeah, it starts at the cross. So yeah. And I think it is powerful what Don's saying. He's like, there is logic to it. He's not just appealing to the guy's sort of like spirituality or supposed so. He's saying it's like, we've tried your plan and you're number 4. I think that's when like the real moment where he's like starting to get this guy's attention. But I love what he says here. He's like, every woman wants choices, but in the end, none wants to be one in a box of 100. You're giving every girl who wears your lipstick the gift of total ownership. And I think that that's just, it's a great part of this episode. It's a great summing up of like Don's philosophy on the world, of like him wanting to own who he is, he wants to have that choice. He doesn't want who he is to be integral to who he is and something he can't change, because he's a man who reinvented himself, who went to New York City and decided he doesn't want to be Dick Whitman. He wanted to be Don Draper. So when Bert Cooper looks at him and is just like, I know what kind of person you are, and it's immovable, it's a stone, Don freaks out. Because he's like, no, I wear this mask, and if I want to be somebody else, I can. If I want to go over to Paris with Midge and be a completely different person, I can. No one can like settle me, is essentially what Don is thinking, but not able to sort of, he doesn't have words for it. I don't know who I'm ranting to. You guys aren't even like antagonistic, and I'm like yelling.
Yeah. No, I think that's all fair. I think it's an accurate read.
Oh, were you ranting? I saw the book in your lap. I thought you were just reading a page from this.
Yeah, exactly. Again, this isn't even in the book. I think like we should say, so like people don't think that we're just like spouting, but like the book kind of mentions, I think we've referenced the book every time it's been specific to that, right? Will?
I try to at least if it's something I pull directly from the book, I try to make sure I reference it.
Are you asking me not to discredit you by making jokes about the book?
No, I actually think they're pretty funny, but I do want to be clear about what MZS is saying so that people know what to expect in the book. I want that to be like, you should read it, because we're not really like getting too deep into what his argument or his read of this episode is. He favors it way more on the side of like the underclass people, the racial politics, and how all that stuff goes. He goes way deeper on that. It's not something I ever really built out of this episode. I think it's like one element, and I was actually kind of surprised reading that excerpt in like how that was his main sort of takeaway. I think because it wasn't really mine.
My weirdest takeaway was when I was reading it is when he says that white people were better than everybody else. But again, that's what I read in the book.
And because not everybody knows Michael Verhulst, his brand of sarcasm does not say that.
I literally started this episode talking about how I've never even heard of this book or read it. So,
well, we'll have to hope people aren't skipping around.
Yeah. I mean, I would recommend it if you get a chance to read it, Mike.
I would have read it if you would have invited me to be part of the club.
All right, Betty.
You're invited now, bud.
If I can't get you to believe in Jesus, then I can get you to believe in Mike.
All right. So, where are we? All right. So, the men leave the meeting. They're successful. They're laughing. They're having fun. And there's this crushing moment where they pass Peggy and go right into Don's office. And she's just sort of like hearing them revel, and like that, it was her idea, MZS says this in the book, I think, where he's just sort of saying like the gender discrimination of the time is like so apparent in this moment, and how, she's just sort of like, she doesn't know anything about what happened. She doesn't know how the meeting went. She is just left high and dry. She hasn't even seen the work, as we see, or about to see. She sees it for the first time through them, and she had no say whatsoever on anything. And yet at the same time, it's a huge victory for her. They invite her in and they're like, Peggy, ice, and it's very dramatic. But she comes in and they let her drink with her, but it's such a power dynamic. It's very, very sketchy.
But it's also like, I mean, an uplifting moment, because there is something like your heart does kind of sink when they close the door on her yet again, I guess. Like you said, she did the heavy lifting. She's the reason why they had success. Then you just close it, and then it holds long enough that you think they might cut and just be like, that's it. Like, yeah, another example of workplace sexism. But then the door opens and it's like, whoa, she's invited in. But yeah, I mean, it's, it's a sort of pitiful way of like inviting her in. It's like, it's not really
She's probably wary. She was like, oh, am I going to get fucked again? Like, yeah.
But you're right. I mean, it is another reference to a door, though. I see what you're saying in the beginning. It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is
vampires.
Something I kind of took from Matt Slice, but I'm expanding upon it. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's just interesting how, doors play a big factor in this episode.
They really do. And there are clearly limits to, like, because Peggy is somebody who is politely trying to climb the ladder. She is trying to do more. She's trying to express herself, and she has that moment where she's just like, "Can I keep it?" Like she's pulled a little bit of a Glenn Bishop. She's like, "You won't even miss it." But no, they don't go for it. So, yeah. All right. So Peggy, in celebration, decides, hey, you know what? I'm going to maybe start my own party. Why should I wait around? She tells the switchboard operators, and next thing you know, they're planning a party at PJ Clark's. This is also the part where Lois has her infamous series-defining line about the bowling team. Where is that spin-off where like Lois is like bowling with like the ad executives as Sterling Cooper?
Well, you really love that line. Second reference.
It's really great. It's the bowling team. Perfect.
Something, since we're talking about the switchboard operators, I never really took into account the irony that the one actress that plays Flo went into like one of the biggest marketing campaigns of the last few years, after doing this show. Just something that just didn't cross my mind until now.
She's no E-Trade baby.
Oh, man.
And she's still doing the commercials, right? They haven't slowed down with her at all.
And you know what the irony is now? The greater irony is, who's in those ads with her?
It's who? Who is it? Will?
Jon Hamm.
Jon Hamm?
It is Jon Hamm! You dirty dog, it is! And it's like total different power dynamic. He asked her in the latest one. I don't know if we're even allowed to talk about it. We're gonna get sued by Progressive.
Yes, sure.
He's like,
I don't think it's not a spoiler.
He's like, do you remember me? And she's like, oh yeah, mildly successful actor trying to make it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Recently Emmy nominated for a commercial
for reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean,
I still can't believe I'm connected to Jon Hamm in some like very weird way.
Well, I don't know how much we're allowed to talk about.
I'm not nothing at all. Moving on.
Okay.
John Kiss John.
Oh no, but we didn't get to the part where Peggy goes to the guys.
Joan? Oh, I thought you thought when she like.
Oh yeah, Joan has her like, oh, glad to see your work has suffered for a reason.
But
okay, Joan.
Peggy has the upper hand for the first time. Like she kind of undermines Joan, who was previously her mentor for 7.
Joan was waiting for her to fail. Like she was waiting for Peggy to fail and then come running to her, because they are going down totally different paths right now. And Joan is frankly hurt by it. She's losing who she thought would be her mentee, And I think it's something we already talked about in a previous episode. My theory for like why she feels hurt in this, and people usually take it as jealousy, and I don't think it is at all. I think what Pete feels is jealousy, and also like a threat to what turns him on. But Joan, I think, sees it as like a betrayal. She sees it as sort of like, you were my like little sister, and now you're going off and doing this whole thing. Watch The Bear on FX.
You were the chosen one, Anakin.
I wouldn't go that far. She's not Darth Vader. Gosh.
I know.
But yeah, so she, she kind of invites the boys out. And then we have this like quick thing where Harry is just like, when will women stop asking for things? And you get like a little hint that something's going on with Harry. He's not super happy with what's going on with his home life. And we also get another wrinkle in the whole sort of like, Ken doesn't like to, Ken's a published author. Paul's ribbing him. And Ken is just sort of like, oh, I don't like to limit my words so much. And as somebody who like does advertising writing and novel writing, I think Ken is kind of spot on there. So, yeah. And then also Peggy, we can give her this, but she gets a little cringy when she's just like toodaloo, and she like does her like little skip. Like she's so happy. Like how could you hate on her? You know?
Oh, the little like kick flip or whatever, like the little like
kick flip. No, she doesn't like grab a skateboard.
I wish that'd be so fucking sick. She'd be like, those
later
losers.
losers.
Yeah. Kick flip.
See you at PJ Clark's, bro.
Yeah. No, I meant to say she does a little like skip, which is very cute.
Yeah.
And then a little kid named Tony Hawk is in the crowd.
Yeah, that's that kid, Tony Hawk.
Whoa. Check that out.
I'm going to be the Lord of Dogtown.
No, man. Well, now you're mixing up your skateboard things, I think. But
I'm lost at this point.
Every skateboard's the
same. Maybe so.
Lois.
Well, that I feel like Mike's really verging into slander at this point in this episode, I have to say.
So Lois tries to invite Sal, and he's like, I'll be there. Yeah. But instead, Sal goes off to meet Elliot, the executive that they had at the Belle Jolie pitch, the younger one. And so they're sharing drinks at the Roosevelt Hotel. They have a fun little conversation about the wonder of New York City, all of its possibilities. And I love the writing of this line. He's so enthusiastic. And man, I get, speaking of spinoffs, but eventually, it starts to turn, you see clearly there's something going on. There's a little bit of flirtation. There's a little bit of like, is this going to go somewhere between these two guys? A lot of sexual chemistry. And so eventually he's like, maybe we could, we got to go eat something, right? And then we'll go ahead and resolve this. So basically they're at this table. I think they've just had drinks. I don't know if it's implied that they ate too, but he said he would eat. And he's like, you know what, Sal? You want to see the view from my room? Like he's putting on the moves and he's smooth as hell. But Sal doesn't want to do it. I mean, Sal kind of mentions, he wants to do it, but he refuses to. And he's essentially, at one point he's saying, it's like, he misinterprets the question of like, what do you want to do as sort of like, I want to maybe break off with one of the writers and, start a design focus shop. And he's like, no, about the view from my bedroom. And, it's sort of revealed here that Sal's a virgin. He's never really acted upon his urges to be with men. And Elliot kind of, gives him some like, encouragement of like, I'll show you, this is an episode called the Hobo Code, right? And there's all kinds of codes throughout this episode. And this is one of them, the code of like grabbing the glass. It's something that Sal recognizes, because this is a time and place where it's extremely risky for gay men to hook up in New York, because even if you have that sexual tension, you can be outed, the other person can be repressed and, betray you. And there are all kinds of like codes and stuff to keep themselves safe, which mimics the Hobo Code that we kind of get later in terms of like the people who live on the rails, that live an avant-garde lifestyle. This is a sad scene. It's really sad. Really sad for Sal. And, the rejection he gives to Elliot when there's a clear opportunity here for a connection.
Yeah, I mean, especially because, as you were alluding to, that scene with them at the bar is probably the first time and maybe one of the few times we actually get to see Sal like with his guard down, where, kind of similar to Don.
See his
he'd always
self.
have like Don, very rarely can kind of like be his regular Dick Whitman self. But, as we've kind of mentioned, like there are times where that guy comes out, like with his his affairs with Midge and different points. Like you can kind of see it. And with this scene, like you finally get to see like the real Sal. Like he's, flirtatious, but he's like open, and he's even kind of vulnerable. And, like he's someone who's usually like the first one to say the wittiest, kind of smartest line. He's a little tongue tied and bashful. And it's like very charming, lighthearted scene. And then, you're thinking like, yeah, maybe things are going to finally work out for dear old Sal. And then, they don't.
It also made me sad. Like it's a sad scene on itself, but then when you compare exactly what you're saying, John, comparing learning that code to Dick learning the Hobo Code, it's really sad that it's, a child Dick Whitman learning this code. And Sal is this, I mean, actually, I don't know how old he's supposed to be in the show. I would guess late 20s, early 30s.
Sal?
Yeah.
I think he's like in his 30s, late 30s. 40s.
Well, I was doing the whole actor thing where the actor looks older than the character is supposed to be, but he's this older man, and he's now just learning.
He's the art
code.
Director, so
yeah.
But
I figured Sal was the same age, if not older, than Dawn.
The actor himself is Brian Batts, who I don't know if you guys recognize him from any other shows that he's been in. I think that, or any, I don't know if I've any
I
movies
did a lot of
either.
like theater, mostly.
I'm not as aware, but I do know that he originally like auditioned for Mad Men and in 2005 and wasn't going to do it. I think I forget. I think they had him for like another part, but eventually they got him on when they did the show later than they had originally planned. So, but he's an older guy. I mean, he's like in his right now. He's in like his 60s. So I think when they were filming this, he was in his 40s.
Well, he's 59, but yeah, he would be older than Jon Hamm by at least a decent amount.
And it's not played that way, right? Like it's played like, he's like his boss, because I was just listening to our episode that just came out, New Amsterdam, and he has that whole thing. I was like, we can throw this artwork away in a second. And Sal's just like, like a little like, but yeah. So yeah, very sad scene. But then we go to PJ Clark's, which is a real bar in New York City. I think it's still operating to this day. And the Sterling Cooper gang is celebrating, drinking. They're doing the cha-cha, super fun. Joan and Lois are gossiping, and Joan is making remarks about Peggy's weight. So she has visibly gained some weight since the beginning of the season. And Joan is kind of being catty and mean about it. And it's kind of like, be nice. Stop bullying. But she doesn't. Lois is clearly waiting for Sal to show up. He doesn't. How sad. He's with Elliot, and this is all watched for Lois. And eventually we see the twist, or we hear the twist come on. Chubby Checker's A Twist, which came out in 1960. The ladies go wild. They're like, whoa, they love the twist. We see Harry invites Hildy, Pete's secretary, to dance. And we get a bunch of we kind of see them in the background. And so it's kind of something to remark on when you see that Harry is like dissatisfied with his marriage, and then he's like dancing with another woman very flirtatiously in this moment. And then Peggy, she sees Pete kind of sitting alone. He's been miserable this whole time. He clearly didn't want to come. And she tries to get him to dance with her. And he says no. He's like, I don't like you like this. He doesn't say no, but he rejects her. And he's like, I don't like you like this. And I think we've kind of touched on this already. What he doesn't like her as is somebody who is fun, making plans, celebrating, being self-sufficient.
And successful and, leading the office, kind of doing the thing that he's wanted basically for all of his time in the office, however short at this point.
He's a bit of a Michael Scott to bring up their office again. He couldn't get a bunch of people to go hang out at PJ Clark's. And I think it hurt. What he's miserable about, especially, is that he goes to work to escape the misery he feels at home, but he's feeling it at work too. And for good reason, because he's very, very awful to his coworkers.
And isn't it the timeline of the day too? Like that was the morning they fucked. And so he's feeling all this power.
I think this is the first episode where it's only one.
Yeah.
Or no, there was one other. The pilot was over a course of one day, right?
Mm-hmm, I think.
Like a day and a half, maybe. And this one kind of is. It's like a day and then immediately the morning after.
It's a day and then there's a flashback, which was like 2 days or
that doesn't
3
count,
days.
Will Ashton.
This episode takes the course of 10 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
10 years? How old do you think John's is?
Quit asking me about ages.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say, before this heartbreaking moment with Peggy and Pete, Peggy was having a hell of a day. She got laid.
And she's dancing with Freddie, and
dancing. The pitch got off pretty well.
But then it ends with her crying. It's her, but it's her party. She'll cry if she wants to.
There you go.
But I think that's the moment where she kind of figures out the attraction that she has with Pete would never work. I think this is the mark of her essentially being like, you know what? It's never going to work out with this guy. And happy that happened for her because she can do so much better. It's ridiculous. So, yeah. Did you have one more thing, Will? Don't want to stop you.
Now it's kind of dumb because we're going to highlight it, but I was like, call Sufjan Stevens because she should have known better.
It's funny you mentioned Sufjan Stevens because that episode of The Bear that I told you about prominently plays Chicago, and it's really good in one episode. It's
hell yeah.
Will, you got to watch this show. Mike, have you seen The Bear?
Good. Of course I've seen The Bear. I worked in a restaurant. Everybody I worked with has texted me about that damn show.
I've worked in a restaurant too. Yeah, I've heard it's good, yeah.
We'll have to do once we're done with Mad Men. We can do the bear.
We'll do the Mad Bear Men.
Yeah. Why is the bear talking? Is the name of it. All right. So then,
Proud of that joke, John.
Why is the bear talking? I just love that line. No, the line is, I just find it odd that the bear is talking. Anyway, so
Negroupies, do you think that's a funny joke? Let me know in the comments. Again, calling all the Negroupies.
We go to very interesting scene of the episode, the last major scene, which, this has been interstitial, but I've been doing this in chunks just to make it easier, because otherwise we'd be going like back and forth. But anyway, so Dawn goes to Midge's apartment. There are a bunch of people already there, a bunch of beatniks and hipsters and, ne'er-do-wells. Roy Hazlett, great last name, of course. He makes his return. I don't think we've seen him since Babylon, I want to say. And so we get back to our, Devil's Triangle. And I really did think in this episode, it's like, I feel like they're 2 conversations away from having a threesome. Right?
Which would have just been so sad for Sal. That Sal can't live the life he wants to live, but fucking Dawn gets everything.
Roy would be down. Roy immediately would be like, yeah, man, let's do it. He just would. But anyway, Dawn pulls Midge aside and is just like, pack a bag. He takes the check out. It's like, we're going to Paris. We're going to have breakfast in Versailles. He wants to run. He wants to get out. But she's sort of like, I have plans. They're going to get high and listen to Miles. And Dawn is like,
Triangle?
Fine, okay. Huh?
I said Devil's Triangle, or like the Devil's Lettuce.
There you go. You knew what I was doing from the start. And then Dawn smokes marijuana for the first time.
I presumed it was the first time, but is there anything that they say that directly?
Yeah, because they say
the Wizard of Oz thing.
Yeah. They're just like, how does it feel? He's just like, I feel like Dorothy. So they are framing it. They're writing it implicitly like he's never done it. And I don't think they would be that overt about it.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Did either of you think during that scene though? Think back to Joan and Roger, the episode before though. Pretty similar. Hey, let's go do this. Different reasonings of why they can't go. But I just thought that was interesting. I'll throw that in there.
Wait, what do you mean?
Dawn asking her to go to Paris and her basically saying no just made me think of...
and then like what Roger and Joan in the last episode.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I forgot about that. That's a good point. Men trying to control women. When will they learn? When will we learn? Okay, so then Dawn goes to the bathroom and looks at himself in the mirror.
Gets so high, he remembers one of the most pivotal moments of his childhood.
But I think it makes sense, right?
On weed, I guess.
Because, Mike, I think touched on this a lot, this idea, and you said it too, Will, like, he feels like an outsider.
Yes.
But he considers himself an honorary, He sees these beatniks and he's so at odds with himself. There's a line Pete says earlier in the episode where he's just like, I have all these things going on in my head. I think Dawn does too. I think he just sort of sees himself as like, I should be able to code switch. He wouldn't have the language for that, but he's like, I should be able to fit in with these guys. But he also resents them because he reinvented himself. He decided he wasn't going to be like going to go down the same path that his family was going down. He ran away to the military, Yes. He ran away from like his identity as Dick Whitman, and he decided, you know what, I'm gonna be this ad executive guy. I'm gonna make tons of money, and now he's being judged for it, and he can't reconcile that. And I think what hurts him even more is that scene. And I know we got to talk about the flashback, but that part where he takes a picture of Midge and Roy, and it kind of mirrors Marriage of Figaro, episode 3, where he has the camera and he sees that couple having like a tender, honest, genuine kiss. And he knows what love is. That's, I think, specifically what he's referencing, where he's just like, I do these pictures where people look like they need to be in love. I know what it looks like. And he even says to Midge, he's like, you're breaking my heart. He plays it off. But clearly he actually is brokenhearted in a sort of like self-interested way, if that makes sense.
Behind every JK, there's a little bit of truth. To be able to fully wear the mask that Dawn wears, to be able to motivate himself over those years to reinvent himself, you have to fuel yourself by judging the type of life you could have had, so that beatnik life. And so the fact then that he's being judged by those people that he himself looks down upon and thinks, well, I could do what you can do, but you can't do what I can do, is also...
Don Bootstraps Draper, yeah.
Yeah. There's also
Make something of yourself. He's talking to himself. He's talking to his
Right.
younger self that he sees in them.
But I mean, there is something to be said though about like before that happens, he's kind of like removing the layers. Like he takes the hat off, he takes the jacket off, his tie gets loosened. He is trying to kind of like take those layers off and like be with them. But there is like, you know, he still has the tie on, even though it's loose. He still has like he's still guarded in some, even when he's trying to loosen up, like he can't fully.
He can't fully do it.
stuff.
And we've seen him be like that with Midge, right? We've seen him be Dick Whitman with her, as it's implied, but he has a harder time doing it with more than like with witnesses, you know? The whole thing where he kisses her and everybody's clapping, that has to rankle him a little bit.
Is that,
you know, this idea of it? Yeah.
Is that screenplay or direction, you think, of, you know, this, because it is such an important, I think, really powerful bit that he leaves the tie on, but a little bit loose. Like, it's such a great visual. But is that screenplay level?
I bet it's probably a directing thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would guess direction, but I mean, it could have been in the script. I don't know. I didn't read the script.
Who directed this episode, John?
It was
Phil Abraham directed.
He's primarily the cinematographer for like the first 3 episodes at least he shot.
Yes.
But he was also a main cinematographer for The Sopranos, and he directed like 1 or 2 episodes of that show as well. So
Chris Provenzano wrote it. And my guess, if I had to guess, I would say that it was probably part of the script that at one point he like takes off his hat, like, but it probably wasn't drawn attention to. I think Abraham is probably the one who made that a more intentional visual sort of linger.
I just love the choice.
Yeah, it's great. And then we haven't talked about the flashback yet, but yeah, we see young Dick Whitman. He's outside the farmhouse. We meet his father for the first time, Archibald Whitman. I wonder if I can. Oh yeah, Joseph Culp is the actor who plays him. We see his mother again. We saw his mother in a previous episode, but I don't remember what the actress's name is. Stepmother, excuse me. She ain't my mother. Didn't you hear? Whore child. But yeah, so he's digging a hole as a hobo comes by and is like very articulate. And if it isn't Father Phil from The Sopranos, and I knew Will was gonna like, I read the message in my head before Will sent it. I was just like, Father Phil.
Well, I said, yeah, Father Phil has hit some hard times, which he has. You know, he's a dang bum in this episode. I mean, he was kind of a scuttlebutt in The Sopranos in some scenes, but he's a full out bum in this episode. But and so I guess he's like kind of a bum by choice. We find out later, like he's a bit of a Jack Kerouac. So the actor is Paul Schultz, by the way, and it's kind of like the 1950s. I think saw a lot of this, like the post-war people who couldn't quite fit into the American dream, you know, aesthetic and framework. You know, he had the job, he had the mortgage, as he mentions. There's even the whole scene where it's just like communists, they don't have souls, they can't be saved, or they have souls, but they can't be saved or whatever. And there's this idea that like as a hobo, it's expected that's for him, he couldn't be tied down to those things. He says that outright, but he's somebody who rides the rails. He's somebody who just has all this existential dread in him because for so many reasons. And it's something that I like about this episode, that they don't try to, you know, analyze him too deeply. They let it be vague enough so you can read a lot into what he means by certain things. But yeah, I mean, bottom line, he comes by and is, you know, asks for a meal. And then it's clear from the start that Don's dad is a very selfish, disinterested person. He's a bit of like an Ayn Rand kind of main character, honestly, where he wouldn't do something for somebody else. And so I think Don recognizes that in himself. I don't think that he consciously knows what Atlas Shrugged is about and makes that connection when Bert is sort of talking about all this stuff. But I do think the show wants you to make that connection, even though it's something we know that Don doesn't. Since I think it's implied that he's unaware of objectivism. I'm seeing nods. I'm not seeing disagreements on that. No, I was gonna say, true. I think the dad's name is Archibald and the mom is Abigail, just for reference sake.
I don't remember the name of the actress for Abigail.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I see it here, Bryn Horrocks. But anyway.
Wow, so he really is the son of a whore. Oh wait, that's not mom.
I was waiting for that. I was like, okay, I said that, and then here we go. I probably pronounced it wrong. So even though his dad is like, we ain't Christians no more around here, Abigail Whitman is like, that ain't true. That ain't true. You're going to stay with us. You're going to eat with us, but I'm going to have to boil those clothes. You're going to sit at my table. It's very, we're in the thick of the Depression. That's for sure.
Religions comes up again, kind of going
That's
back
right.
to an earlier talking point. Yeah.
You see it as like an ideal of sorts for Don, right? Because he's a WASP, but he doesn't take sides. He doesn't, when it comes to political issues, as we've seen, social issues, he's very indifferent. He wears these things as identities and hats. He doesn't wear them as like convictions. And again, that's another layer, I think, to the whole sort of like, you either believe or you don't. And I think Don is preaching as a non-believer himself in a lot of ways, especially like when you have that part where Roy is just like, you invent want, you make the lie. And I think that resonates kind of deep with Don because he does. Like, he creates this idea of like religion will save your soul when he doesn't believe it himself. He's like this weird half measure between he's more like his mother in some ways than his like stepmother than his dad, because she sort of puts up this front of being like, we are Christians, like we will be nice. But when it comes down to it, she still is a very hateful person, is my read.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
Oh, I was also just going to say, there's never been a snake oil salesman who's actually believed in their own product, right?
Well said. Well said.
Yeah.
But were you going to say,
I don't know. I was just going to talk. He has that line where he's just like, we live in a indifferent world. And I feel like that's more Archibald than Abigail. But I think what you said.
Mix, yeah. The universe is indifferent. But what do you think he really believes that, though?
Yes and no. I think there's a part of him that has to believe that to kind of sell his own, to sell the idea of Don Draper. He kind of has to believe that. I think in his heart, he'd rather believe that's not true. But I think there's an idea that like he needs to believe his own lie in order for the lie to become real, even if it never will be real.
I think it's proven out in the fact that he doesn't want to be his father. He doesn't want to be a dishonest man. The hobo explains to young Dick Whitman the Hobo's Code, and one of those things being like, this is the mark of a dishonest man. It's the mark that he gives his father, because his father is dishonest. He, stiffed the hobo for his hard work. And I think it's telling that like immediately after this flashback, Don goes home, goes to his kid, and is like, ask me anything, because he just wants the chance to not lie to his son, And the son is just like, why do lightning bugs light up? Like, poor kid, like put on the spot. And he's just like, I don't know, but I will never lie to you. And I just imagine as a kid, like, what the hell is going on? What is wrong with you?
I also imagine him in that scene too, just being like, you fucking idiot, ask me a better question.
Yeah, exactly. This is the end of the episode, Bobby. Like, we need to end on something profound.
Can't you tell I'm trying to be a character arc right now? Like, come on.
Yeah. The music's playing, the themes are coming together, and you're on lightning bugs. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Is there something about lightning bugs, guys, that has to do with this episode?
Looking it up, the light of a firefly is a chemical reaction caused by organic compound luciferin in their
just like this episode. That's exactly.
Sure.
Sorry.
Because I love this episode so much, I looked up, I went onto YouTube and I rewatched just the Hobo Code scene, and there were so many people in the comments who were like, wow, this says so much about the hobo that he saw that there was a dishonest man who lived there and he still went in. And I was like, is it that hard to read or understand that he left the sign? It wasn't already there for him.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just making sure.
Because it was kind of, I've never took it as he read that and went in.
Yeah.
I took it as he marked it.
There was 15 comments like that.
Interesting. I guess it's possible, but I assumed the same thing, that he did it overnight or he did it whenever. Yeah.
Yeah.
But because he gave the chalk to Don, so I guess it's implied he would have done it before then. And he even says,
but it
he
wasn't
kind of
chalk.
implies
it was a
his
knife.
dad.
It was carved.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
but he did kind of say that your dad is he's a real son of a bitch. He didn't say that, but he's kind of your mother will take care of you.
Mm-hmm. You could to the comments defense, I guess, it is kind of hidden behind the bushes. So I guess you could argue that he didn't see the logo and that someone else put it there, but I don't know. I kind of took it as
he was
like
standing over there, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm saying. I mean,
You could read
took
it
more as like
yeah.
Yeah.
You could read it either way, right?
Sure.
But the thing is, he expects the dad to do something there, but I think he did already sort of expect. If he did the mark himself, he expected that it was a dishonest man. So
I think he does it afterwards. I think it's supposed to be a suspension of disbelief, like Batman, that he can carve this, walk away, and be 4 posts down when Dick runs out to see him.
Or do you think it's some sort of like a false memory? Like maybe he saw that later and he's just conflating the memory with this moment.
If that's the case, I don't think the episode is trying to make you think that, right?
It's 2007.
I don't think so either. I just mean
we don't have to get into the unreliable narrator television shows yet. Like,
I do love the speech though that the hobo gives to Don, to Dick. You know, just like that whole line. Like I've rewatched it too, Mike. Where he's just like, you know, he talks about like death came for me, and now I sleep. You know, I sleep like a stone, and like, it's so well written. You know, Schultz knocks it out of the park in the acting, and then also there's something to be said of like, you know, what is that? What does he mean by that? The death that came for him. I always took it as like he was suicidal, and essentially was like, his life, the anxiety, the depression was like causing him to have like dark thoughts, because he mentions like every night he can't sleep. And then that was his way to cope, was to run away. And I think that resonates with Don, because that's what he does when he grows up. He runs away.
Yeah, I think this is a little bit of a reach, but I did think like, because you're beginning to see the inklings of the beginning of Don Draper's story. And the first thing he asks him there is, do you smoke? Just thought it was interesting, since the first episode of Mad Men is so centered around smoking and Lucky Strike.
Yeah.
Smoke in your eye.
And, well, there's the whole thing too, where every episode starts with Don falling off the building, and the implication being him, you know, killing himself. And that being a sign of like running away. This is, I think, an episode that connects that idea of like, if Don would be to take his own life, it would be because he can't get away for whatever reason.
Is that Don killing himself, or is that Dick Whitman killing himself and falling into a life of being an ad man?
You can read it so many different ways, huh? Because that's literally what happens, right? But is that Dick Whitman? Dick Whitman wouldn't wear a suit. Anyway.
Well, no, I mean, but there is something, because like with his whole Paris escapade, he's willing to throw his life away at a moment's notice, just to have that kind of spontaneity and kind of have control back in his life.
Yeah.
So and I think that's true of Dick, and I think that's true of Don. So there you go.
There you go, indeed. And she doesn't want to go with him. And even though like he knows that she loves this Roy guy, and yet he tries to mark her, you know, and he literally takes the check and gives it to her, puts it on her, tries to mark his woman, and tells her to buy a car. And I wonder if that has something to do with like him watching his dad tinker with the car. I don't know if that's like part of it, why he has that on his mind. But I think also the idea of like, get out of the village, you know, make something of yourself, or whatever he wants to say. Yeah, it's a sad moment for Don. But he kind of like struts, you know, a little bit of like, they're like, well, you can't go, like there are police there. You know, there was like a domestic disturbance. He's like, you can't. And then that's another subtle, but not subtle sort of hint at like, they are white like him, except for one person there, but they are a lower, you know, they're an underclass in the sense that he can do things that they can't. He can put on the Don Draper mask, literally put the clothes back on, and he can navigate a world of power that they can't.
And yet, but I think that is obviously true, but I also think there is something to be said about like a lot of those beatniks kind of chose that life as well, kind of similar to the hobo. You know, they there is kind of a parallel there where we don't know enough about them to know for sure, but a lot of those folks, like they wanted to have that kind of lived in experience. Like they're rejecting the comfort of their previous lives. And so,
and there's something to be said about the fact that Don doesn't know that, if, you know, he assumes that they didn't make that choice. He assumes that they're doing it because, you know.
And that's kind of similar to his father. He just looks down on them no matter what.
But isn't that classism at its core too? Always assuming that, you know, people in worse circumstances than you are like, you know, you hear it so many times, like people are homeless because they're lazy. You don't have a good job because you're lazy. I mean, it's been the same thing for years, right? It's upper class classism.
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I am lazy, but I mean, that's regardless.
But a dishonest man does not live here. I mean, we're all a little dishonest, sure. And then the episode ends with a mirroring of one of the first parts of the episode, where Don walks in, shot from the back, goes over to Peggy, goes into his office, closes the door. You just hear tons of ringing, and there we see the mark of a dishonest man, quite literally, quite in our faces, Don Draper. And that is his mark, because that's not his name. But in some ways, isn't that who he really is? Because he decided it's so. Interesting note to end on.
Yeah, I love the comments this show has on identity. Like, are we who we are because of our actions? Are we who we were born? You're seeing so many different characters struggling with.
It's like the ship of Theseus thing, but with people.
Yeah.
It's like if you reinvent yourself and you like deconstruct yourself and rebuild yourself, are you the same person being dishonest, or are you the person that you want to be?
I mean, yeah, and also, I mean, just kind of going back to the idea of advertisements, like if you sell the lie convincing enough, does it become true? Even when it's never was true.
And then you buy the product and you actually are happy.
Right. So
is that still bad?
But at the same time, though, Don is never happy. So what is he getting out of it? If he is,
if you tell people, listen to Mad Men, you'll enjoy it, and then they enjoy it.
That'll make people happy.
We invented want.
Sure.
We're for them, not us.
Sure.
I'm here for the groupies and the groupies only.
That's the end of the episode, and there are so many other things we could have gotten into. We didn't talk about Sal's mom enough. There's an interesting moment between Peggy and Don, that moment where her blouse is like ripped. I forgot to mention where Don is, she kind of mentions the keeping a spare kind of thing, which he does, of course. She knows about his affairs. And there was a whole thing where I found out that this is one of the first episodes where they shot Sterling Cooper in LA, and this is a shot where they filmed the whole thing at the barn down the road from the Disney Ranch, which I thought was pretty cool.
Oh, I also read that Dick Whitman's house is Schrute Farms. That's real.
Schrute Farms is probably be like way more fun, wouldn't it? That's real. It's the same location.
Same location. Are you asking me, would it be more fun to live on a farm in the Depression era with lost parents being told you're a whore child, or like being the king of the Beat Kingdom? Yeah, John, I think that'd be a little bit more fucking fun.
All right. But your life is going to get canceled because, the farm got canceled, or they didn't even make that show. We had to end with The Office. We brought it up 3 times.
I'm so glad they didn't make that. I know we're trying to wrap up an episode, but that would have been so bad.
That's all I had, though. Was there anything else you guys had, though, for this episode?
Have you guys ever had sex in the office?
No.
Nope.
Have you?
I have.
Yeah, you have. You probably have multiple times, huh? Just once?
I'm a dishonest man. I don't know if you do.
Yeah, we can't believe a word you say. Next episode is going to be Shoot, which is a big Betty episode, and a lot of people really like this episode. I definitely like it. It's one of those episodes where I do want to kind of watch it, and because rewatching every time I rewatch the show, I usually binge it, and so a lot of them blur together for me. But like we've mentioned this before, like doing it step by step has been a little bit easier for me to differentiate the quality of these episodes. So I'm kind of curious where this lands.
I mean, for me, when I first watched this season, Shoot was a top 3 episode for me. I don't know if that's going to be the case now, but we'll find it out soon.
Yeah. What were the other 2 in your top 3? Red in the Face and what else?
I don't know if Red in the Face. Which one was Red in the Face?
I thought Red in the last one we did, Chip and Dip.
Oh yeah, I think it might have been that one and the pilot. I think those might have been my 3 favorites.
Wow, not the election episode?
The election one? Which one was that?
You'll see.
Yeah,
okay.
I honestly don't love a lot of the episodes after Shoot. I think they're good, but they're not my favorites. My favorites are probably Marriage of Figaro right now. Marriage of Figaro, Babylon.
Wait. John, quit trying to push your fucking idea of ranking episodes. We'll do it later.
All right,
wow, you really just
I'll try to be sneaky.
You just sold us. You made us think. You asked the question just so you could then do it.
I invent want.
Wow. You really do this for a living,
Nick,
huh?
the lie.
Oh man.
See you all in
Real
the next
Don.
one.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.